Guten Abend, liebe Sonne.
Was hast du? Und dann sagt die Sonne, ach, leck mich doch am Arsch, ich bin jetzt im Westen. Ja.
Ja. Name? Dienstgrad? Abteilung?
Guten Abend, liebe Listener. Hallo und willkommen nach another episode of Kill James Bond. I am Alice Gordon-Kelly. Joining me, as always, are my friends Abigail Thorne and Devon.
Buongiorno.
Hello.
And
Ja, hallo,
I've done the
super.
thing, right?
All right, I'm not going to do that again.
Ex-geil. I've done the thing again, where I'm like, oh, I do a comedy podcast where we talk about bad movies. Wouldn't it be fun to have like an hour and a bit of quite earnest discussion about a good movie? Doesn't that fit well inside that
I
paradigm?
love to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I made you guys watch The Lives of Others, Das Leben von anderen, which is a German movie about East Germany. And obviously that's going to be a laugh riot. So you can settle in for some jokes, some some goofs.
Yeah,
some
I mean,
spoofs.
it was very different than the last film you made us watch about East Germany. I was expecting there to be like singing and, trans women. But no, sadly, this one is just about like surveillance.
Yes, yeah. But I'm interested to talk about this one, and I wanted you guys to see it because I think it says a lot about institutions in ways that I'm interested in. I'm going to try and use this as a prism to address the cop thing, but also about parasociality and about surveillance.
Yes. Yeah.
And about what if the guy in the panopticon was nice, actually?
Mhm.
I don't know this, but what if he's looking out for
What if
me?
there was somebody listening to the things that you said? Like, what if you thought you were having
Yeah.
a conversation with your friends, but actually there was some weird fucking pervert somewhere who was listening in on everything you were doing? Fucked up.
The panopticons never hit home for me, honestly, because if I was put into a panopticon, every other prisoner would be fine because the dude would just be looking at me the entire time, 24/7.
Literally placed myself in a panopticon for a living.
The thing about the panopticon is it's very cool.
Getting a
but
note from the guard in the tower being like, yo, are you single? Drop the skincare routine, queen.
Getting a note sent across from the guard that's like, I think it's so cool how you don't do any voice work. So we begin in 1980s, I think it's like 1985, East Berlin, in Berlin-Hohenschönhausen prison, with a prisoner being escorted down a corridor, and some lights come on automatically, and the guard like stops him and makes him look at the floor, so he doesn't even get to make eye contact with another prisoner.
Yeah, I will say that was something that I found quite harrowing about this film, is that it is the 1980s period piece, but the 1980s like wasn't that long ago, and some of the aesthetics of it, like the cars and the clothes and stuff, do still feel like pretty modern. So it's kind of scary to see like this is how bad things were extremely recently. Like my brother was alive when this sort of thing was happening. I wasn't, of course, because I wasn't born for another 15 years. But
No.
this is still like, it's quite sort of, it's very scary, actually.
Oh yeah, and this is the thing. It's certainly within not even living memory, relatively recent living memory in Germany too. And as our prisoner is brought in, he sees his interrogator, a Stasi officer, Hauptmann Wiesler, who is played by Ulrich Mühe. Sadly, very sadly, died quite young,
Oh.
pretty soon after this movie came out. He's a great actor.
Oh shit, his performance in this is so good.
He's
I know.
phenomenal in this movie.
Yeah.
But the thing that I want to talk about and why I mention Ulrich Mühe is because he was an East German border guard during his national service.
Whoa.
And he was then a dissident against the East Germans as an actor, and protested against them. And after the wall came down, he found out that 4 of his colleagues and his wife had been Stasi informants. So they asked him for an interview during the press round for this, how he prepared for this role, and he just said, "I remembered."
That's so
That's how
hard.
near to what we're dealing with.
His wife was a Stasi informant.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Offizieller Mitarbeiter, an unofficial collaborator.
That's a sick surname. Mitarbeiter?
No, that's what the Stasi called their informants, was EMs, IMs, unofficial Mitarbeiter. But so,
fuck, that's embarrassing.
Hauptmann Wiesler, this Stasi agent, interrogates this man, and we see this is intercut with him teaching. He's recorded this. He's playing it back on a big sort of very 80s tape recorder to a class of students at the Stasi training school in Potsdam as like a model interrogation. And the guy being interrogated claims, he knows nothing. What he's being interrogated for is one of his neighbors has fled to West Germany. He's committed Republikflucht. He has like deserted the Republic, and they want to know whether he like knew about this, whether he assisted him. And initially he says, no, I didn't know anything. I was with my friend at this and this time. And the interrogation just repeats and repeats, and we see a sort of like passage of time until he's been like so sleep deprived and been asked these questions so many times that he's repeating exact phrases about where he went. And in the classroom,
what do you think about when you jack off? Again and again and again, they ask.
That's right. It's a bold choice, I think, to introduce this character Wiesler torturing someone, which is what sleep deprivation is. And I think this is going to get into sort of how we approach this film as a morality play. The implication is he's been doing this for years.
This even gets like flagged up by one of the students in the class who asks him like, surely this is inhumane to keep him awake for this long, and we get a little shot of him just marking a little X against that guy's name in like the seating plan. Something I have done many times as a teacher.
So we think it's a great deal out of like certain repeated words, and one of them is Mensch, menschlich. It means human or humanity in German, but like to translate it naturalistically into English, you would have to use it in its context in like as like 5 different words. You would have to say like human, man, guy, stuff like that. So I'm probably gonna like use it untranslated here. So what the student says is, "Das ist doch unmenschlich." It's you can't keep him awake for that long. It's inhuman. And he just sort of like quietly notes this, and he explains that like no, the reason why we do this is because these are the enemies of socialism.
Yeah, he also says that an innocent person, when kept and treated in this manner, would become angry at the injustice of it. But a guilty person, like he says, this prisoner, will fall back on stock phrases, will repeat themselves, will become quieter and withdrawn and cry. And it's interesting. It was an interesting choice by the filmmakers that we never find out whether this prisoner was innocent or guilty. It wasn't until we started flashing forward to the class that I even realized the prisoner wasn't our protagonist.
Yeah, no, he breaks, of course, under torture, and he confesses, we know not whether truthfully or not, that his neighbor was involved in this escape, and like assisted his other neighbor or whatever. And then we get an interesting historical detail, which is after the prisoner is then taken out of the interrogation room, we hear on the recording Wiesler take the covering, the upholstery off of his seat to use as an odor sample for dogs. And this is true. The Stasi did this routinely, and there are jars and jars of these seat cushions just in records to this day.
I know it smelled crazy in there. Also one thing we see is that they threaten the prisoner's family.
Yes.
And that's what eventually gets him to confess, truthfully or otherwise.
And at this point, we have Lieutenant Colonel Grubitz enters the classroom.
I love this guy. He's such a fucking shit, but this performance is so good. I really like him.
He's so good.
Yeah, Ulrich Tucker.
He's a weirdly likable character despite being like thoroughly despicable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he's friends with Wiesler, and we kind of get the impression that he's better at politics than him. That Wiesler kind of like has been doing his homework for him for like X number of decades. And
Cute.
yeah, it is, and they have a good relationship. So Wiesler is very like straight and narrow, very idealist. He looks kind of like a monk too. He has this very like close cropped hair, very intense expression,
and he hardly ever blinks on camera, which I assume was a deliberate choice by the actor. But he's I mean, as his job suggests, he's always watching. And it's just his screen presence is just absolutely magnetic. He seems like a weird robot, and it's so good.
Yeah. And so Gruvitz goes, listen, I'm going to take you to the theater and I'm going to make both of our careers because I have an in here. And so they go to the theater. It's the production of a play by Georg Dreimann, who we see being surveilled by our two Stasi men from a box already. They're not even like watching him yet. They're just watching in general. And Wiesler has the little like opera glasses, his little binoculars to watch people with.
So cute.
It reminds me of a joke about it's an old joke, I can't remember who, about like a psychiatrist is someone who goes to the Folie Bergère and watches the audience.
And ask them how they jack off.
That's right.
Well, exactly. And so Wiesler is watching the audience of this play, and this is a film that loves theatre. It basically is a 3-act play.
Yeah, it is.
Feels
it's
very much like a play. And Dreimann is an intellectual. He's a playwright. As Grubitz notes, and what I think is like a really great sort of sly observation about the GDR, he says he's our only non-subversive writer who's also read in the West. It speaks to such like this dearth of talent, right? That it's this guy. He's the only one who's like worth reading.
Everyone else has either been suppressed or has run away.
Exactly. Yeah. But he loves the country, and this arch sort of way. He says he thinks the GDR is the greatest country in the world. He sort of smiles. And the lead actress of this play, Christa Maria Seeland, who is Dreimann's girlfriend, and sort of we see Wiesler watch her, and he has a little reaction. But more importantly, down in the audience, we have the most repulsive man in this movie, or possibly any movie I've seen for a while.
Real
this
cunt.
Toad in a suit.
Just a proper dickhead.
This horrible reptilian pig man is the performance is so good. I'm not knocking the actor.
Bruno Hempf, the Minister of Culture.
Yeah, I got to be clear. Yeah, the way that this character acts means that all three of us going, "I hate this cunt, kill him dead right now," is just a firm compliment to his capacity.
Yeah,
on screen.
Yeah, absolutely.
He sells this so well. He's literally the dude in the Chernobyl miniseries who just is like, yeah, I used to be in charge of a pencil factory and now I'm the head to the workers of the world.
Yeah.
But that for an hour and a half. It's just fantastic.
Yes. Yeah. And we see Grewitz tells Wiesler, he's one of our guys. Hempf, he used to be a Stasi man. He got promoted into this. And he asks Wiesler what he would do about Dreimann. And Wiesler, who is like, we come to see inherently suspicious, is like, no, yeah, I would definitely surveil him because he's quite arrogant looking, and I don't approve of this as a good socialist.
Yeah, just like based on literally the way he looks and stands, they're like, yeah, we should put this man under state surveillance. Yeah, of course.
So Hempf calls Grewitz down to meet with him, and we have the first of what I think is one of the great pieces of this movie, which is conversations where there are two conversations going on at once, and where sort of like there's an implicit meaning that has to stay under the surface. And so what happens there is that Hempf asks Grewitz, "What do you think of Dreimann?" And Grewitz correctly realizes that he is being told to surveil him. He sort of picks up Wiesler's instinct. He goes, "Well, I wouldn't trust him necessarily." And Hempf even like sort of lightly makes fun of this. He's like, "Well, a sort of a lesser man, ordinary Stasi man would be like, oh, he's one of our best. He's above reproach, but that's why you and me are going to the top."
Yeah, it's quite fun actually that Grubitz sort of passes off Wiesler's insight or suspicions as if they were his own. It's kind of like, again, like copying his homework.
Yeah, but what I like about it is that I think it's him being able to read Hempf a bit, and being able to understand that he's being told to do this, and so he agrees to do this. But then we see a bit more of why Hempf is doing this, because we get a sort of an after party after the play, and Hempf is looking at Dreimann and Zeeland dancing together with sort of undisguised, purely atavistic sexual envy, resentment. and he's just staring.
Yeah, he has a crush on Krista. Like he wants her, and then he kind of threatens / teases Dryman in a covert way. He's like, "Oh, how's your friend this Jerska, this director Jerska, this director who's been blacklisted?" And Dryman's like, "Well, yeah, he's really upset about being blacklisted." And Hemph is like, "We don't blacklist people. No, of course not. I hope he gets to work again soon."
You should be careful what you say. So using words like blacklist.
Yeah. It's and also he gropes Krista.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
And it's all of this dialogue, I think, is quite sort of true to history, in that, like, the GDR allowed certain kinds of dissent, and often a surprising amount, within this layer of, like, hope or irony or even sarcasm, where it was very clear that, and this is something that comes up in all the conversations, that there's a line, right? And so long as you don't cross that line, it's all right. It might be, like, slightly risky, but there is a sort of a ne plus ultra. There's a line in the sand. You can't go over that. And once you do, you're just out. And this is what's happened to Jerska, right? And so he's been blacklisted. But Dryman can still, sort of make representations for him. He can still sort of, as long as he doesn't say blacklist, he's allowed that much. And it's I think, a quite clever observation about how East German authoritarianism in particular worked.
I like the quote directly from Drayman, which I enjoyed, was just like, "My players aren't strong enough to survive this guy's direction. I need Jerska."
Yeah. They've placed a, like, loyal director on his play, and he's not good.
Yeah, it's interesting, actually, and I think quite clever the way that it portrays this surveillance state and authoritarianism, not as completely rigid and kind of rule-based, but actually in a far more sinister way, that there is flexibility, but it's always arbitrary. That the use of power, you're never quite sure whether you are in the clear or whether you have crossed the line. You're never really allowed to know what the rule is, because it's the business of the people who have control over your life to know what the rule is. And I think this is very kind of astutely observed.
Hemph also has a great line that I want to draw out in this conversation. Well, he proposes a toast, which is quite a menacing toast. One that is, like, openly covetous of Krista, but also, like, quite threatening towards Gale. He quotes Stalin. He quotes Stalin's saying, the poet's the engineer of the human soul, which is, like, provocative. So he makes this toast, and then he has this line where he talks about Jerska, and he says, "People don't change. It only happens in your plays. You want this idea that people can change, they can get better, because you're a moralist and an optimist, but it doesn't happen." And that is, like, from where we, like, having seen the movie, from where we know what happens to these characters, it's brutal. But also, just as a piece of, like, German history, for an East German bureaucrat to be able to say people don't change is so interesting, because you have this idea of, like, this long parade of German 20th century history of, like, a lot of people like this, a lot of bureaucrats, a lot of, like, sort of potentates just sort of switching ideology as convenient, liberals becoming Nazis, becoming social democrats, becoming communists, becoming liberals again,
so long as they can keep being cops.
That's right.
Yeah, well, exactly. And I'll have something more to say about this when we get to the sort of the third act of this movie. But it struck me as a very sort of, like, a very salient line. It's sort of like there's an underlying cynicism there about power that I really like. But so Wiesler has to go and put the surveillance operation up.
Just quickly, something that I enjoyed a great deal is after this long scene of the party in Drayman's apartment, we get Wiesler going home to his own apartment, and it's just, like, dire and empty, and it's really put across because, like, they keep putting in these long tracking shots across his apartment to show how, like, there's nothing in it at all. His dinner is, like, spaghetti with some fucking tomato puree put on top of it and mixed in. Like, it's fucked.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
It's very plain, but also, my notes say, his flat is sterile and Spartan, but it's also, like, it's really nice. Like, it's a very spacious flat.
Conceptually a nice flat.
So many people who I know in London will walk in and be like, "Oh, you're doing all right, aren't you?"
Yeah,
pretty good being a member of the Stasi, isn't it?
Because he works for the Stasi, yeah.
Yeah.
it's sort of this perverse thing where the state has rewarded him for being the kind of person who is unable to appreciate its rewards. I really, really like that.
Yeah, there's definitely something I adore about giving this character a very nice but completely empty apartment.
Yeah, it's
especially juxtaposed against
the word I would use.
The full party in the previous scene.
Yeah, and especially against Draymond's flat, which we see is kind of full of knickknacks and art and books and stuff. It's like smaller and not as nice, but it's full of life. And we see Draymond's flat now because Whistler follows Draymond, spies on him, and then installs a bunch of bugs in his home. And there is a fucking incredible bit where Draymond's neighbor sees them installing the bugs in the flat, and Whistler approaches her door, knocks on it, opens it, immediately addresses her by name, and threatens her daughter by name as well.
Yes,
it's just like
Frau Meinecke.
Yeah, it's just like if Frau Meinecke, if you tell anyone about this, little Marta will lose her place at university, and it's like
the amount of like
he's not like, what's your name? Who are you? Like he's just he knows he was prepared to threaten this woman.
I absolutely massively love that, because to me that's very indicative of the German sense of itself. Because I think if an American film was doing a similar scene, they would have their agent knock on a door and just speak to him like normal, and then on the way out be like, by the way, how's Marta doing at college, or something like that, to like imply knowledge. But the German dude just stands there and goes, don't tell anyone or Marta's going to lose her place at college, and then moves on immediately. And I find that interesting. It's like a national character thing.
Yeah. So he sets up all of the sort of bugs behind the light switches, cables run in through the walls and stuff. Threatens Frau Meinecke on the way out. And this does speak to the sort of like the depth of knowledge that the Stasi had. Like, and it truly is incredible. We see like later some of the files in different contexts, and there's miles and miles and miles upon them. And that's accurate. I mean, the Stasi generated more written records of like German history than, any German government, ever since the Middle Ages. And depending on who you ask, had, between 1 in 50 and 1 in 7 East Germans was an informant for the Stasi. So this is not unsupported.
No, so Draymond goes to visit his friend Yuska, who's been blacklisted, and kind of like gives him a bit of false hope. We see that Yuska is a bit down in the dumps because he's like, I can't direct, my career's over.
That's another thing. It's another one of those conversations where they both kind of know the other one is lying, because what Hempf has told him is, well, he can still hope, because hope's the last thing to die. It's like a taunting sort of like, no, he's never going to work again thing, and sort of. Draymond has to recount this selectively, and he says, well, he said there's hope. And Yuska kind of nods, and neither of them really believe it, but it's sort of this subtextual thing that I really like.
And then Draymond has a birthday party at his flat. He invites his friends, and Krista is there. We see that Krista is taking pills. Secretly, we don't know what they are.
Everyone lies. Everyone keeps secrets.
Yeah. Really good.
And Whistler is listening, sitting there in his headphones, like listening in to this party, trying to sort of catch people doing some
and again,
things.
It's phenomenal juxtaposition, because you get the party, which is like full of these like artists who are having like as good a time as you can have when everyone's paranoid about the Stasi, but it keeps getting cut back to Wiesler in his like listening outpost, which is this like derelict attic, and he's just completely on his own listening to this. It really, it's just fun. It's really good. I like this movie a great deal. I gotta be honest, yeah.
Yuska is at the party, but he's not having fun.
Like a spectre at the feast, and he leaves him a present. But then Draymond is pulled away because his friend Paul Hauser, who is kind of a dissident, but like not quite as bad as Yuska, and therefore has not been ostracized, gets in a fight with the director that the state has like imposed upon him, and says that he works for the Stasi, and Draymond has to like push him away and like apologize for him and stay politic. And Hauser says to him, he's with the Stasi, and Draymond goes, no, I don't know that. talk about a fucking intellectual lacuna
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah.
It's like, because it's not, I don't know that. It's, I cannot know this. It's something that like I'm aware of, but I cannot allow myself to acknowledge. It's great. And then we get Menschlichkeit again, because Hauser says, if you don't talk to me again, if you're going to work like this, if you're going to become like them, if you don't take a stand, you're not human. So,
and then we have a really, really amazing bit of filmmaking because after the party, Draymond and Krista have sex, and we get some like swelling music, and like we get like all the stuff that you would expect as, you know, two characters lean in and kiss and have a romantic moment, and then we just get a hard cut to music, even cuts out to Whistler like tapping away on his typewriter, being like, Draymond and Krista presumably have intercourse. Ching!
It's really good. It's fantastic.
So like sterile. It's a brilliant little moment.
So at this point, we get the fucking canteen scene, which is
this is my favorite fucking scene, hands down. It's so good.
Wiesler and Grubitz are getting lunch in the Stasi canteen, and Wiesler sits down at a sort of like regular table, and Grubitz goes, well, wait a second, we're officers, you don't have to sit there. And in a sort of like beautiful sort of moment of being a true believer, he says, well, socialism has to start somewhere. So they sit down with their food, and next to them, some more junior officers are talking. And one of them comes in. He's like, "I've got a new joke."
Yes,
which is the joke that you heard at the beginning. And this is a historical joke. In fact, I will just recount you the joke. Erich Honecker, the general secretary of the party, is in his office. He sees the sun outside in the morning. He says, "Good morning, dear sun," and the sun says, "Good morning, dear Eric." And at this point, he notices the two much more senior officers sitting next to him. He catches himself and he's like, maybe I shouldn't tell this joke.
Oh, and Grubitz is the one who goes, no, go on.
He confides him so hard in this scene. Grubitz like, go on, man.
He's like, I probably know it. In fact, Grubitz imitates Honecker's voice in order to get into his like, "Guten Morgen, liebe Sonne," and he like goes, "No, I've probably heard it. It's fine. Go ahead. We're all friends here." So he's persuaded into continuing with the joke. In the afternoon, Honecker gets up from his desk, looks at the sun, and says, "Good afternoon, dear sun," and the sun says, "Good afternoon, dear Eric." And then in the evening, as he's packing up his things, he goes to the window, he sees the sun, he says, "Good evening, dear sun," and the sun doesn't answer. So he tries again, he says, "Good evening, dear sun," and the sun says, "Kiss my ass, I'm in the West now."
It's really good, and like everyone is laughing, and like Groove is like laughing, he goes, "Name? Rank? Department?" Which is just, it's so fucking perfect. It's so perfect. And it keeps cutting to Isla, who clearly hates this.
Yeah, and this junior officer is fucking shitting his pants. As Grubitz is just like, "I'm going to have to write you up. I'm going to have to report you for this, man. That's subversive behavior." And then Grubitz turns it around and goes, "I'm only joking with you, man. I'm only pulling your leg."
He tells a worse joke, which is, what's the difference between Honecker and a telephone? You hang them up and then you try again, which is Neuwahl, and it's like a German pun for like hanging up a telephone and voting for someone else. So he tells a joke about like hanging the guy and sort of like sets him at his ease. It's a much stronger version of the same joke is done in Death of Stalin, where Zhukov sort of plays it on Khrushchev, and he's like, you know, importuning a Central Committee member is a very serious crime, and I'll have to report this. You should see your face. And it really, that sets up just how sadistic Grubitz is, but also all of these sort of like little buried landmines that exist in East German society that at any time can just like end your career.
We also get a nice moment just before this where Wiesler and Grubitz, before this joke scene happens, Grubitz says, "Look, I read your reports from surveilling Draymond, and you wrote down that Minister Hempf picked Krista up and took her home the other night. I've removed that from the record. You didn't see that, okay?" So we kind of get a bit of confirmation that this is a romantic rivalry, and that this is kind of Hempf misusing the organs of state to try and get rid of a romantic rival. And we see that Whistler is like slightly upset by this misuse of power, and Grubitz is just like, whatever, man, just like find something on Draymond
make
to
our
get rid
careers.
of him.
Yeah, and therefore find something, right?
And we also, and then we see Minister Hemp pick up Krista in his car, and he rapes her, basically.
Yeah, this is a I'll let you
Brutal.
talk about this.
Well, I think this is worth talking about as and in sort of heavy inverted commas here, good rape scene, right? In that it makes us sympathize with her.
Mm-hmm.
She is like a whole person. We feel her loss of dignity keenly. Hempf, on the other hand, is not just menacing, but also ridiculous.
Yeah.
He's pathetic.
He's not portrayed as like powerful or kind of strong or
grimy and unpleasant.
hog-like. It's just
yeah. And
it's also we see the kind of mounting tension as the horror of the scene unfolds. This really sort of, I suppose in a way, mundane horror. It's one camera angle and it doesn't cut, and we're just looking at the back seat of the car, and it's just
it's such.
We also get some
grubby,
and like an uncomfortable.
Oh yeah, good word.
Because you're just in the back of this car. It's like one camera. It doesn't change, and you're stuck in there with them.
There's some great sort of voyeurism there as well, because we see just a little shot cut into this. I think it's the one shot that's cut into this of Hemp's driver watching them in the rearview mirror, and it's just like, oh, this is total surveillance. It encompasses everything, including this. And it's so uncomfortable and desperate. And so Wiesler is in his surveillance attic. In what I thought of as like the moment where it starts to get parasocial, he has chalked out their floor plan of their apartment on the floor below him, so that he can like sort of like follow their movements. Yes. And he sees on the camera outside that Hempf's car is dropping Krista off, and he at this moment sort of breaks with protocol. This is the part where he goes off the reservation for the first time. He
makes an intervention.
He does. He manipulates.
He starts trying to interfere with the Blorbos from his show.
That's right.
That's right. He interferes with their intercom to try and like get Dryman to go down to unlock the door and get him to see Krista coming out of the car. And what I'm interested in is, to me, this is in part a movie about institutions and about bureaucracy. Any bureaucracy doing anything needs its share of like true believers, right? And there's different ways of being a true believer, but it needs its share of idealists. And I think often unintentionally, even part of the function of a system, like to preserve itself, is to compartmentalize those idealists, to like keep them doing stuff that they're comfortable with. Whether that's, that there's stuff that the sergeant doesn't tell the lieutenant, or whether it's like, I don't work on missiles, I work on guidance chips that are going to go into missiles, and I don't think about that extra step.
Mm-hmm.
There's this sort of like intellectual quarantine that's going on. And Wiesler is like just breaking that containment immediately and quite violently to be like, no, it is time for some bitter truths, is what he says.
Yeah.
And so he facilitates this. He makes Dryman see what Hempf is doing.
Yeah, he makes the doorbell ring so that Dryman, thinks there's somebody stuck outside who's forgotten their keys. And Dryman goes down and sees Krista getting out of Hempf's car.
Mm-hmm. And immediately puts it together and immediately sort of like intuits what this means. And so when she comes back to the apartment, she gets in the shower to try and like sort of like wash everything off of her, which and
it's harrowing.
It is, and he comforts her. And he, they lie in bed together. He embraces her, and there's this fucking shot is the best shot in the film. Is they fall asleep together like this, and then we cut upstairs to Wiesler, who is also asleep in his chair, who is like bent over like he's with them, like he's being held with them. And that sort of that relationship, that imagined relationship that need to be held and comforted and protected, fucking set that up against Hempf and his sort of like grimy predatory instincts. It's quite something. And just the composition of that one cut from shot to shot, I could talk about that for hours.
Yeah. We also see that Weister is getting even more involved in their lives because he walks around Draymond's flat when Draymond isn't home, and he even steals a book from him. And again, because this film likes theater, it's a book by Brecht.
Yes.
So he's starting to just move into the flat whenever Draymond's not in, which is so cute. We also see that he hires a sex worker because he wants to again, this idea of him wanting to feel sort of close to someone or to be held by someone. And then we learn that Yerska has sadly hanged himself.
I do want to talk about the sex worker scene because it's quite brief. But the fact that it's brief is worthwhile and notable to me, because he can't have a meaningful relationship with someone. It doesn't the state doesn't facilitate these sorts of things, and so the kind of sex worker that he gets to come to the block full of Stasi officers' apartments is very businesslike and very remote, and it's just yeah, I'm on the clock. And there's a joke in there. In fact, he gives her directions up, and she's like, "Oh yeah, I know. I'm in here all the time." And it's just sort of oh, this is like a perk, right? This is something that you get for serving the state. It's like a TV, or it's like having a slightly nicer apartment. And much like the slightly nicer apartment, he doesn't really know what to do with it. It's sort of it's lost on him. There's something there that is alienating him from it. But so Yerska, we're told that Yerska has killed himself.
Draymond plays the music that Yerska gave him, which I think is called Symphony to a Good Man or something.
Yeah.
He plays it on the piano.
Sonata von guten Menschen.
Sonata for a Good Man.
Again.
Mention again. And Weister is, of course, listening to this.
Shut the fuck up.
He's listening in on the headphones, and he's moved to tears by it.
Probably so, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, incredible shot as it just the camera slowly pans around Weister's face, and we just get him crying as the music swells. It reminds me quite a lot of Equilibrium, which would make an interesting companion piece to this film.
A movie about when you start taking estrogen.
Yep.
So, but as he's weeping listening to the thing, Draymond says, can anyone who's actually heard this, actually heard it, be a bad person? Also, this is something I want to talk about. I want to talk about Gerd Wiesler's iconic jacket.
Yeah, I want to talk about this jacket. It fucking whips. It's the thing.
It genuinely does. So the whole movie, he's wearing, mostly over a suit, this sort of grey nylon jacket that is supposed to be ugly. I think it fucks. We see him come home and he has one jacket. It's the one thing in his house that he hangs up. And first of all, that's great in and of itself. It builds both character and setting that he's only got one jacket, and he feels no need to get any more. Feels no need to change or adapt to fashion or anything like that. Is happy with his his grey thing, which looks quite monastic as well. But also, he wears it zipped up really tight around the neck the whole time. When he's listening to the music, it's the first time we see him with the coat sort of undone a bit more. But,
lovely little touch. We also get quite a funny moment where Weister comes home after this, and he's in the lift, and a small child gets in with him and says, "Are you really with the Stasi?" And he's like, "Who told you that?" And he says, "Oh, my father did." And he says, "Do you know what the Stasi is?" And the child said, "Yeah, you're the bad people who put people in prison."
It's really good. I wrote down kids at Earth's biggest snitches. Dude just gets in the elevator and was like, "My dad says the Stasi are bad," and he goes, "That's interesting. What's the name of your?" And then stops, and I was like, "Ball."
Yeah, he very nearly destroys this child's life and then decides not to, which is cute.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. I think that's maybe one of the most important character moments for this guy in the entire thing. Is
shows that he's
that's
starting
the moment
to
where
change.
he's hang on, wait a minute.
What if being a cop is bad?
It's the only time where someone makes fun of him is because he forcing himself not to do the cop thing. He allows himself to be made fun of because he says, "What's the name of your ball?" And the kid says, "Balls don't have names."
You're weird.
Yeah.
Oh, now we get this fucking incredible scene between Draymond and Krista. So Krista is going to meet Minister Hempf, and she says, I'm just going to go meet my classmate. And Draymond says, look, I know you're not. I know you're going to go and meet Hempf. And he says, you don't need him to be successful. He's like, you're a fucking good actor. You've got talent. Your audience loves you. You don't need to like give in to this blackmailer. And she says, like, fuck you. Yes, I fucking do. Like, you don't understand what it is like to be an actor and to have talent in a society where you do not have the institutional power. Like, you don't know what that's like. Yes, I do fucking need to go and see this man.
There's a brutal
so
line.
Good.
The real knife here is where she says, you get in bed with them too.
Yes, I was going to wire that up too.
Which is just brutal. I mean, she's not wrong. And it's sort of, it's quite a keen thing to posit this as, no, this isn't any worse or any better. This is interchangeable. We're both sort of degrading ourselves here.
Yeah, and I really, really felt for Krista in this scene, because to give you a peek behind the curtain here, listeners, an acting career is an extremely fragile thing. Like, even if you're doing well, it can be ripped away in an instant. I've spent all of this last week as the ball in a game of tennis between my agent and a very big studio who are like, they offered me a part and then took it away and then offered it and took it away, and I've been bounced back and forth, and it just fucking shreds your nerves. So I really felt for Krista in this scene, being like, yeah, I fucking do need to do this actually, because you may think that I have talent, but talent actually doesn't fucking pay the bills. What pays the bills is paying the fucking bills.
That's right.
Yeah, and so she walks out.
And at this point, Wiesler is like let off by his replacement for the night shift.
His replacement, who is a pig, by the way. This sergeant, the fact that he's a sergeant will become important later. But who is very much of the mold of like, artists, and I bet they're having sex right now, and is just generally sort of not very bright.
Yeah.
Which is something that we will see sort of Wiesler exploit later. But he goes to in a very sort of Berlin move, he goes to the Eckkneipe, the corner bar pub across the streets. And we see him drink. He orders vodka instead of like he orders like a seltzer, and then catches himself and orders like a double of vodka.
And we get a shot of him, which is a great shot. He's facing towards the camera. He's in focus. In the background is the door to the pub, and through that comes our lass, comes Sealand.
Yeah, Krista. Yeah. And he sort of he introduces himself to her as a fan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He makes
like, I really
another
love your
intervention.
Videos. Been watching for years. Actually came out because of you.
Yeah, this shit is extremely parasocial. Like, for us, this scene is such a fucking like, oh, we've had this conversation.
It hits different when you have a podcast.
Yeah.
She's agonizing about whether to go to Hempf or to go back to Dryman.
She's drinking to get such courage.
Yeah. And he goes, "You're a great actor, and I'm
your audience," he says in a fantastic double meaning.
This is a recurring word again. Publicum, audience, will come up again. But yes, she asks just flat out, should I sell myself for art? And he says, you already have art. It'd be a bad deal, which is a great line. But just the thing about surveillance, right, is that you are seen, you are perceived, and Krista's thing is that no one else is seeing her. And so that he is able to do this, that he is able to like know what is going on in her life, and is like able to advise her, sort of however tacitly, to go back to Dryman, is so powerful. And what's really funny is that he sort of accidentally becomes the way the Stasi always wanted to present themselves, as just looking out for the sort of like individual proletarian, right? Because he is in this instance trying to look after her in a way that is creepy and vicarious and voyeuristic, but still well intentioned.
It literally has like slogans on the tube in London from the Met Police that are like, "We're looking out for you."
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely.
Fucking hell, man. Fucking cough. But anyway, she says, thanks very much. You're a good man, which, again, an echo of what we had before.
You're a mensch.
And in the morning, Whistler goes back to the surveillance attic and he reads the report from the sergeant overnight. And he reads that Krista went back to Dryman. She didn't go and see the minister after all. And she kind of like broke their date. She went back and just shagged Dryman's brains out. So good stuff.
Yeah, sick.
And of course, the sergeant, because he is ignorant and misogynist and lazy, has no idea what to make of this. And so the way he's written this up is he has no idea.
He's so confused.
She says she'll never leave again, and it's like, I'm not sure what she means by this. Maybe she intends to take better care of the household.
There's a point where you get like the shot of the report, and there's a number of points where he's got like a question mark in brackets within the middle of the prose, which I find to be very fun.
Yeah. So Dryman has begun work on an article inspired by Yerska's death about suicide in the GDR and about how it's
just
more
in
or
case
less
you worry this film was going to do happy listeners.
Yeah. Because suicide in the GDR is like one of almost like basically a handful of unreported statistics.
Yes.
And it's a state that collates information and tabulates everything, and it does not record suicide because there are so many, is the implication. Because there are so many people who are like driven to despair. And he's smuggled
it's very
in,
much like Britain.
yeah, he's smuggled in this ultra flat typewriter with a red ribbon, which he can hide. But in order to do this, they have to find a place that's like safe from surveillance. And so they go, oh, well, Dryman, he's like, he's friends with Margot Honecker. He's like, he's probably won like a Stalin Prize or whatever. No one's going to bug his apartment, but just in case, we'll test it. And so the way they test it is they get very drunk and they arrange sort of like a radio play.
Yeah, they kind of like
Loudly
loudly discuss their criminal plans deliberately.
It's great fun.
They're like, oh, your cousin is helping smuggle my brother out of the country. He'll be stopping at this border crossing in a bright
car.
yellow Mercedes.
Yeah.
The other thing is like they're clearly having fun with it. Like being able to speak out loud about like sedition in such a manner is so exciting that they just get really into it. Which I find very, very charming.
And the vibe is that, like, well, if the Stasi are listening, then the car is going to get stopped, but there's not actually going to be anyone in it, so it'll be fine. Like, so they're trying to play a little trick here.
Yeah, the false flag.
Because the ultimate plan is that Dryman's going to write this article about suicide, and that it will then be smuggled out and published in the West. Is the idea. Yeah. And Whistler is, of course, listening to them, and he doesn't report this. I think is the implication that he figures out that they're like trying to set him up, or is it that like he's trying to do them a favor by not reporting it?
Yeah, he literally he calls the border post and like is about to report them, and he's like, oh no, this one time I'm gonna let you get away with something. And
my precious blowbuzz.
Yeah, he makes the most, to my mind, suspicious thing you could possibly do, which he puts in his notes: 7:32 p.m. No further incidents to report. And I'm like, no, you do that on the hour. You cannot be doing that at 32.
Damn, Dev, you're good.
I would have caught that. I'm just saying.
You should work for the Stasi. That's good.
I should look into working for the Stasi. That's definitely not something that's already on that.
And of course, to do the right thing avoids falling into this trap. And so they begin typing up this article. They keep Krista out of it. And they store this ultra flat typewriter with the red ribbon sort of under the sill of a door, the bit you walk on. So at this point, Oh,
by the way, the reason they got this new sort of ultra flat typewriter is because the Stasi can identify the brand of typewriter that somebody uses by looking at the font. And they know all the writers what brand of typewriter they use. So if they have like an original copy of something, then they can know who wrote it.
The reason why they know this is because in East Germany you had to register a typewriter. And that is true. You had to have a license for it. Then again, every printer that you can buy prints identifying microdots on anything you print out of it. So
really?
Yeah.
Just as a side note for anyone, but that's why the printer refuses to print in black and white if you've got no yellow ink left. That's why it does it. It's because it needs to do the little like side thing so that you can identify. Oh yeah, that's right.
So at this point, Wiesler is called back in by Grubitz, and Grubitz, who has incidentally, in possibly the most cynical thing he says in this movie, he calls the thing between Krista and Hempf a love story. And says, we have an interest in making this love story happen. It's gonna make our careers. He calls them in. Wiesler is thinking about handing in his report that it's going to expose Dreiman, but
oh my god, I love this scene.
What Grubitz does is he's gotten this job as like a sort of like a thesis supervisor for the Stasi training school, and he takes Wiesler through his thesis that he's supervising, which is about artists and dissident artists, and essentially it is a way of destroying a person's ability to create art, right? And the program is that you take your dissident artist, you keep them in solitary confinement for 10 months, you give them no human interaction whatsoever, and then you just let them go.
He specifically says, do not beat them, do not speak, don't even raise your voice to them, treat them so nicely, don't give them anything they can write about later. And then about 10 months, don't make it exact, but and definitely don't tell them when it's going to be, but then just arbitrarily release them.
Yeah.
Do nothing else. And he says, and they will never make art again.
This isn't even like a universal prescription. He's like, there are 5 types of artists.
Yeah, he's doing
because
phrenology.
The Stasi love to have typologies.
Yeah.
It's very telling. I'll say that for free.
What is the sort of hell punishment for podcasters that prevents them podcasting?
I'm sure we'll find out.
So, and this so troubles Wiesler that he refuses to do it. He refuses to turn Dreiman in. He refuses to destroy his ability to create art.
Yeah. Wiesler says, I think we need to wind down the operation. I've been spying on Dreiman for ages and not found anything.
Mm-hmm. And Grubitz is kind of suspicious of this. He kind of smells a rat a little bit. He's like, all right, fine, whatever. I don't care. Just find something. And it's too late because the article is then duly written. It's published. It's smuggled across the border and it's published. And we see that outmaneuvering even Hempf, we see Grubitz on the phone to a general who is threatening to have him shot for having released this. And so this now becomes priority number 1.
Oh my god,
find out who wrote this.
We get my favorite guy in the movie. We genuinely
typewriter
Kaufman
guy?
Star to me, typewriter guy. It's fantastic.
I love
the typewriter guy is cool.
Typewriter guy's so good.
Typewriter guy, first lieutenant, who's brought in to explain typewriters, and Grubitz is just I don't give a shit.
This guy,
fuck you, shut up.
I don't want to draw stereotypes, but this guy knows a lot about Magic the Gathering, and he'll tell you about it in detail if you give him even the slightest prompting.
His
well, Herr Lieutenant, it seems
his job within the state is to analyze the typeface of the script and determine what typewriter produced this, and he does so.
He knows exactly what kind of typewriter every artist.
Yeah, he keeps getting quizzed on it, and it's this guy uses an Olympia Super. It's so good. He's got this big it's because he's doing a presentation. Obviously, we're pre OHP, so he's just got a big piece of paper on an easel and is pointing at it. It's fantastic.
Yeah,
perfect
yeah,
guy.
It's so good. He said, "Look, I've been playing a lot of RimWorld recently."
Listen, fuck off. So Grubitz calls Wiesler about this while he's still in the attic and says, "Oh, have you heard about this fucking article?" And Wiesler, who has been listening to Dreiman write it, goes, "Oh yeah, of course." And Grubitz goes, "Where from?" And Wiesler just throws up his hands. Because
you see him catch the mistake immediately. They're like, "Oh, do you know about this article?" And he's like, "Yes," and then immediately puts one hand, clenches it to his head. He's like, "Fuck."
It's such a great good luck kind of moment.
It's cute.
But he lies that Hauser called Dreiman about it. And at this point, Hempf, who we saw in a sort of intercut thing while the two lovers were hugging each other, alone, very alone in his hotel room, just waiting. He calls Grubitz into his car and he's like, "All right, listen, this is over now. I'm done with her. Here's where she gets her her barbiturates or whatever. Go and arrest her." And and he says, "I never want to see her on a German stage ever again."
He orders the police to end her career in this fucking terrifying scene. And she is arrested. She's taken in. Grubitz interrogates her. She offers
taken in one of those like sort of illicit like camouflaged vans. It's like this. It's a fish van. They're bread vans in real life.
She offers to be an informant for the Stasi. She also, it is implied, like offers to shag Grubitz, and Grubitz is like, "I'm sorry, you've made an enemy of a powerful person." The first thing Grubitz says when she walks in is he says, "You had a great career."
Oh,
and it's like, oh God. Oh, he says, it's a shame. You were really good. It's like, and he's talking to this woman who must be like in her like 30s, 40s as an actress, to be like, your career's over. It's just like,
it's horrifying.
Fuck. It's so scary, specifically for me, but also in general.
And you feel her like her loss of dignity, and like you don't. Well, at least I didn't blame her for betraying Dryman.
No,
which
I was like,
which
that's
of course she
wrong,
does.
but I understand. Like,
he's like offhandedly. Oh, I don't suppose you know anything about like who wrote this, and she has seen him place the typewriter in its.
This is the most like Hollywood moment where he goes, "I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do, unless."
Yeah. So they let her out, and he gives her some more pills because he says like to be an informant, it has some privileges. Try to look surprised when we arrest him. You're an actress, you'll manage.
But anyway, the Stasi come and they search the place. And they don't find the typewriter because they don't look under the sill.
The search sequence is so terrifying. It keeps cutting back to them stepping on this floorboard that we know conceals the typewriter, and it creaks every time. And it's like you feel the tension that this man is under.
Also, they destroy the flat. They like rip stuff apart. They cut the sofa cushions over, and at the end, the guy in charge of it hands Dryman like a ticket and says, "In the unlikely event that anything was damaged, you could claim compensation." And there's this microbeat of like, "Don't try."
Yeah. This is like better and less heavy-handed than when the same joke is done in Brazil, right? Because what Dryman does is he looks at it for a second and he goes, "I'm sure everything's fine." It's having seen them like slash open his couch cushions and upend all of his books and everything, and
really
it's like
good.
It's so much better as like a vulgar exercise of power.
And we see some of the paranoia and the suspicion as well, because Dryman's friends and his like director and stuff like, "Look, Krista must have turned you in. She's the rat." And he goes, "No, it can't be her because she knew where the typewriter was and they didn't find it. So if it is her, if she is a rat, she can't have told them everything. She must at least be on my side a little bit."
Yeah. So Grubitz, having found nothing, now focuses and sort of points the finger of suspicion at Wiesler, and is like, "Okay, well, you've been on this, and now with like no one else for God knows how long. I think that you're up to something here. You have to interrogate Krista.
Yeah,
you
prove
have
to me that you're still with us by
He says,
being evil again."
Are you still on the right side?
So he calls Wiesler in, and the meeting takes place in one of the interrogation rooms, and the first thing we see Wiesler do when he walks in is check if the like scent collecting cushion is on the chair.
Yes.
And I find that,
and it isn't.
And it's not. So he like is a little bit more at ease, and then he is told that he is going to have to be the one who interrogates Krista, and we get
which
a perfect mirrored shot. He is turned away from the door as she enters out of focus, and it is exactly the same shot composition as when she walks into the pub. It is perfect to me. It's a masterpiece to me.
And he hits her with what was, after all, the GDR's line for this thing, which is, the state has, it's nourished you since birth. It's given you everything. It's given you housing. It's given you employment. And now you have the opportunity to do something for the state in return. And
threatens her career. Like she says, "I made it all up. Dryman never wrote the article. I just lied." And he's like, "I don't believe you."
Well, that's 2 years in prison for perjury
lying.
Anyway.
He says, "Dryman."
Think of your audience.
Yeah.
Deine Publikum.
He says, "Dryman will never know what you tell us. You will instantly be released." In fact, what he says is, his opening line during this interrogation is like, "In 7.5 hours, the director of the theatre that you're performing at will go out on stage and say that you are unable to perform for medical reasons, and this will be the last that anyone in the acting world ever hears of your name. And that's his opening line, and I was like, fuck,
So brutal.
Jesus Christ. And then he says, like, don't be a hero. You'd be surprised how many people are in this prison for unnecessary heroics.
Yes.
Oh, God.
I gotta be honest, this is the point at which, like, I'm looking at my notes. I didn't make another note until, like, the final scene. Like, I just got caught and just watched the movie at this point.
It's such a stage play.
so good.
At this
Because
point.
there's no violence. Like, he never threatens her. They never, like, beat her. The Stasi are never shown, like, really... Well, they kind of destroy some couch cushions, but no one ever, like, pulls a gun and threatens anyone. It's all just like, don't you want to do this? Don't you want to do this? Otherwise, I'm going to do this horrible thing to you.
It's
like,
all like the monopoly on violence, right? They don't have to threaten these people particularly hard. They don't have to do anything because everyone within the GDR is under complete knowledge that these people have the capacity to ruin your life. They don't need to.
I remember
threaten that.
at the start of the film, there's a little title card that shows, you know, it says just how many people were informants for the Stasi. I remember seeing that and being like, God damn, those bastards! Like, they must have really like been horrible. What was wrong with the people of East Germany? And then by the time we get to this scene, I'm like, fucking hell! Like, I can understand. Like, you don't condone it, but I'm like, Jesus, I understand why she betrays Dryman at the end of that.
Yeah, 100%.
What's really curious is even in like the popular memory of like former East Germans, like people didn't really know. Like, they knew what the Stasi was, they knew what it did. You know, even children knew that, but no one really knew the extent until they found the files. And the fact that they were able to keep this so secret from so many people, that like in a nation where like maybe 1 in 50 people was collaborating and they all thought they were the only ones, it makes you wonder about what we don't know about now, right? It makes you a little bit paranoid, as well it might do. Because as we will get into later in this movie, different states, different systems, capitalist systems, communist systems, that still has room for sort of these exercises of power.
The first A in ACAB stands for all.
So Grubitz goes to search the flat, and he's like, "Oh, Wiesler's already left. That's weird. Whatever." He goes to search the flat, and
I knew what was going to happen at this point. I knew it.
Yeah, for sure. But what's interesting is he has them search the whole room again, even though he knows precisely where the thing is.
He makes such a fucking show of it.
Purely out of sadism, he's like, "Huh. Wait a second, this also doesn't seem quite
just
right to me."
Just one more thing. Crazy. This doorstop's kind of squeaking. Let me just bend down and put some WD-40 on it. Oh my goodness, it's come right
Oh my
off.
god, could there be some sort of hidden compartment in here? That's crazy. Mind if I just open this? And meanwhile, like, Krista is like watching this, makes perfect eye contact with Wiesler and just like leaves. Not Wiesler.
With Dryman. Dryman realizes that Krista betrayed him. Or thinks she does, and then she runs. She leaves the house in a bathrobe, and of course, Grubitz opens the secret compartment, and the typewriter is gone.
Yeah,
and there's no mystery to this either, because there's a scene earlier where we see Wiesler remove it. Like, it's not.
We know
what's happening here.
But Krista is so distraught that she runs into the street, and it's sort of like dubious whether how much this is intentional. But she gets hit by a truck and killed. And we see Wiesler is there to see it, having like stashed the typewriter in his shitty little car, and is horrified. Dryman and Grubitz, again, it's a play, right? Third act of the play. Everyone rushes out to see what's happened. And Grubitz, in sort of like this uncharacteristic, sort of like feeling some measure of pity or shame, is like, well, it's over now.
I don't read it in that manner. I don't see it as pity or shame at all. I think that in his estimations, if she has stolen and hidden the typewriter, she's taken that information to her grave, and there's nothing they can do at this point. Like, I don't think this is a sympathetic thing. I think this is just it's literally a dead end.
Yeah. So it's now over. Dryman is left in the street with Krista's body.
That's right.
And
yeah, they don't say, "Do you want to speak to anyone? Do you want counseling or anything?" No. They're just like, "All right, bye."
They're like, we seem to have received an erroneous tip-off. Goodbye.
Yeah, wait for the normal cops or whatever. So Wiesler drives Grubitz home, and Grubitz immediately knows what Wiesler has done, and is like, even if you're too smart to leave any trace of this, your career is over. You're going to be steaming open envelopes in a basement for the next 20 years.
Yeah, what was that about?
Well, the postal surveillance, which is, as it looks, not a very nice job because you have to steam open envelopes all day. It's like, it's hot, it's unpleasant, it's menial.
It's sort of where you put the guys that you don't want ever advancing. It's like a dead-end job for disgraced lads.
Yes.
And then they sort of open letters and
there's
read
a detail.
them.
Yes, and there's a detail. The guy in the desk behind Wiesler's is the guy who was telling the joke about Honecker.
What? Oh, I didn't realize that.
Misread the audience once again later on. Just got either that.
No, I think it's because of this. I think that's the joke.
Yeah. Oh, do you think it's because of that, or do you think like Grubitz did that sort of in the background?
I think Grubitz laughed it off, made another joke, and then reported him anyway.
Yeah,
I think that's what the joke is.
I fully believe that.
I didn't realize it was the same guy.
The little jab.
As he's told, you're going to be in there for 20 years. 20 years! We look at the newspaper in the passenger seat, and it's just like, Mikhail Gorbachev is elected Premier of the Soviet Union.
Yeah. And in what is like a very sort of like bitchy little intertitle that I really like, 4 years and 7 months later.
Yeah. The Berlin Wall comes down.
Yeah, the Berlin Wall comes down, and Wiesler hits the bricks.
He just
the
leaves.
Berlin Wall comes down, and he's like, okay,
go.
well, Stasi's over. Just walks straight out.
Germans are a patient people, and good things come to those who wait.
That's
right.
So we now jump into the future. It's 2 years in the future. This is probably my favorite joke in the thing. We're watching the same play that we were watching at the start, but it's now being done with trendy, modern theater setting.
Yeah.
Whereas the previous one was them all in like a fucking...
It was socialist realist theater,
That's really, really interesting. The first time we see the play, it's like set in a factory and there's like a proper set. People are like uniforms and like boxes and handling stuff. But then
everyone's wearing like black.
Yeah. When we see it again, it's
turtlenecks.
Well, when we see it again, I think it's quite an interesting commentary on like, the bourgeois art. When we see it again, it's very abstracted. Like people are in blacks, like there's no set. It's very, very plain. And it's just a nice, especially with the reference to Brecht that we had earlier on, it's just a really, really nice sign that like Dryman's art has kind of been taken, and it's people like it because it's about like the perils of East German communism, but it's been turned into this slightly like soulless abstract thing, and he can't even watch it. He storms out of the theater. It's very well observed.
I wrote down, this is what happens when you let the West interfere with your art.
What happens is it's not just the staging. He walks out because it's the monologue that Krista did in the first scene, and it's the moment where like he, Hempf, and Wiesler were all looking at her, and he's sort of like overcome by grief in that moment. And what's really, really interesting to me is he goes out to the lobby and he sees Hempf there, who is also, and he's like, yeah, I couldn't face it either, because however perversely and rapaciously he loved her in his own imagination, at least, and so he can't watch it either. And Hempf, this scene with Hempf is also really fucking...
I love this scene with Hempf.
And pivotal. Hempf does not look any worse, right? He looks
still in a suit.
Exactly the same, still in the suit. And he says, "Oh, I hear you haven't written since the wall came down. I get it. In the Federal Republic, there's nothing to believe in, nothing to rebel against." And he launches into this sort of like now very familiar like nostalgia like selling point of like, oh, our little republic, it was quaint, but it was nice, and we had these things, and we had art, and Dryman just looks at him with like this sort of unbounded contempt, and he says, "To think that people like you used to run a country."
Yeah.
It's really
good. He uses her as like his moment, because he goes like, "Look, you guys surveilled everyone I know. Why not me?"
Mm-hmm.
And Hempf is like, "Oh, bud, we were surveilling you non-stop. We knew everything.
Check your light switches.
Check your light switches. And we get this beautiful scene where he like where fucking Draymond is just like pulling all of these wires out of his walls. And it's just like, what the fuck happened here?
Yes.
There's a curious thing with this scene with Hemp, which is that I invented in my memory an ending to it. Because I haven't seen this film in something like 5 years at least, and the way I remembered it before rewatching was a little less subtle. I thought it ended with Hemp getting into a Mercedes and sort of making the point more explicitly that like, oh no, all these guys are survivors. They did fine. And it's not there. I made it up. It's all in my imagination.
Spiritually, he gets into a spiritual Mercedes.
Yeah,
a spiritual. I'd love to have a spiritual Mercedes.
Yeah, like Ghost Rider.
Yeah, there's this really this moment where Drymon like pulls the bugs out of the walls, and like he realizes that he survived this, but it was kind of arbitrary that he did.
Sort of feeling of being brushed by the wings of something dark.
Yeah. Well, also like I mean, I don't really understand what it feels like to go through something like that, but like. I'm very much like struck and plagued by like survivor's guilt from having survived what the NHS does to trans people in this country, and to realize that you've interacted with this like horrific fucking system and gotten away with it and like survived, but it's arbitrary that you did and other people didn't. To do
the sort of the handshake meme, one of the things that you can do with both the Stasi and the NHS is request your files.
That's fucking right.
And that's what Drymon does. He goes to the federal agency for Stasi records.
This is, to my mind, this is the funniest thing I can imagine. And I gotta be honest with you, I imagine how the East Germans might not feel the same. But to go to the Stasi records agency and just be like, all right, boys, what did you have? It's such a and they come back with like 10 folders and they're like, yeah, we arranged this by time. I'm sorry.
That's basically the only joke in this
100%.
movie. Like the only like flat joke in this movie is they're like, oh, it's more than one file, so it might be a minute, and he's clearly expecting like 2 files, and a guy wheels in a cart that's like piled high with files, and he just goes respect. It's perfect.
Yeah,
so good.
it's really funny.
so good.
It's like, damn, you must have been cool,
bro. What the fuck? And
So he reads the files and he begins to piece it together, and we see the extent to which Wiesler has been covering for him. The cover that Wiesler has made up is he's not writing an article, he's writing a play for the 40th anniversary of the GDR. And they go, and the Stasi sort of request more information, and Wiesler is left to ghostwrite his play.
the surveillance records to have this like, oh yeah, he said that this is what happens in Act 1 of the play, and this is what happens later on. It's all fucking made up.
What he says happens in Act 1 of the play is Lenin is in constant danger.
Yeah.
But he continues with his revolutionary work. It's so powerful and so sweet.
He also finds Krista's confession and all the reports on him. He discovers that Wiesler was demoted. Wiesler's never referred to by name, only by his code name.
Hagewitz 267. His code name.
HGWX77 in English.
Yes.
And then also the final report of like, Krista was killed or whatever, by Wiesler has like fingerprints in red ink. So he's like, oh my God, he touched the typewriter.
Yeah,
and
but like,
leaking.
this is the guy that took the typewriter. Like, he finally in that moment understands that. He goes over to a guy and he's like, all right, who the fuck was Hagave 7? And like, something else that I think is maybe a little bit weird is that they just have a Rolodex of everyone who worked for the Stars, and he's like, it's this guy, here's his name and address.
Yeah.
To me,
that's sort of a convenience.
Like, oh fuck. Oh, no.
And then in more irony, Drymon goes and surveils Wiesler. He goes and like goes to where he lives and like looks at him.
Wiesler has like this terrible menial job delivering junk mail. This is something that I now want to get into, sort of the way in which this movie is perceived by, in particular, former East German dissidents. They don't like it very much. It's kind of grown on them over time, but this is one of the reasons why. Because, the reason why Wiesler has this terrible menial job is because it's a morality play, and he's being like punished for doing good, right? In actuality, Stasi officers did very, very well for themselves out of reunification. They were one of the few groups who did. Like,
a lot of us became podcasters.
But so, like, I can't overstate what an economic trauma reunification. Like, 70% of East German women lost their job when the wall came down.
Wow, really?
Yeah,
Wow.
that's true. because East Germany guaranteed equal pay for equal work and full employment for women, and the West did not. So yeah, like a lot of people did very poorly out of reunification, and the Federal Republic has sort of like addressed this in its own way, which is not very well. But Stasi men, because they had these skills, because they knew how to work people, because they had these connections, they were very heavily recruited by security companies, by sort of like as private detectives, but even things like real estate agents. And there's like increasingly there's sort of networks of former Stasi officers who like get together and have a drink about the good old days, and it's so weird. And so this is sort of like I understand it as a dramatic conceit. It's not historical, really.
Is it possible that Whistler deliberately refused to use jobs that would have utilized those skills? Is that kind of what it's saying?
Here's the thing. What the director of Berlin Hohenschönhausen, the prison that's now a memorial center that we see in the first scene, refused to let the director of this movie shoot there on the basis that you can't make a Stasi officer into a moral hero. And the director of this movie, Florian Henkel von Donnersmarck, says, okay, well, what about like Schindler's List? And the guy goes, well, that's the thing. Oskar Schindler existed. There was no Stasi agent like this. This never happened. We have the records for this. We know in exacting detail everything they did, and it never happened. Not just because there were no opportunities to, because Stasi agents like worked in teams and were like surveilling each other all the time, but also just because they didn't want to. And it was, as an agency, it produced idealists in a way that they were able to like sort of like keep themselves contained in their idealism. They didn't want to like do anyone any favors like this. And so in that respect, it's really controversial.
Yeah, but I can see that actually. That's a fair point.
But so he's doing this terrible menial job. Also, a couple of little details that I want to draw out as well in terms of like nostalgia. In the Federal Republic, in newly unified Berlin, we see unfamiliarly graffiti on the streets. We see
that was an
homeless people on the streets, and we're like, oh, wait a second, maybe this is not sort of so uncomplicated a liberation as we thought.
Yeah, it's not an unalloyed good.
Yes, yeah.
Whereas all the streets that we saw in East Germany, completely clean.
Yes.
No rubbish, no graffiti, no homelessness. Just, I mean, because there was like full housing, right? I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, this
Even
is
if your house was a prison cell.
Yeah,
like,
you were given a house. It was full of bugs, but you were given a house in every meaningful sense of the word.
Yeah, it's sort of different conceptions of rights, I suppose. Like, it's not true to say that like the German Democratic Republic had no concept of human rights. It's just that those were collective rights. You didn't have a human right against the state because that was something entirely outside that conception of rights. You had a right to housing, you had a right to a job, but you didn't have like a right to privacy, or you didn't have a right to freedom of speech because those were individual rights instead of collective ones. But so Dreiman sees Wiesler on the street, and he's like unable to confront him. And so we get another jump forward in time, another 2 years. And Dreiman has written his first novel, the first thing he's written since reunification, which he has again called Sonata for a Good Man. And we see Wiesler delivering his junk mail, his farm food leaflets or whatever, and just like stopping as he sees the giant window display. In a bookshop on the Karl Marx Alley, which is another fucking piece of hauntology. It's the Karl Marx Buchhandlung, which is real. And he goes in, he like thumbs through it, and he sees the dedication, which is to HGW 27, to his code name, with gratitude. And we get the perfect fucking line to end on, makes me cry every time. He buys the book, and the guy goes, do you want a gift wrap? And he says, no, it's for me. It's just a great little sort of like joke, but
I mean, to do the cry report, Devon cried 2 times during the course of this movie.
I'm noting this down. Devon cried.
Yeah,
at 7:31 p.m. Devon cried.
First one of these movies I've cried at. I'll tell you that for free. You know what? Actually, crying is a bit harsh. I teared up twice, but the tears didn't go down my face. They just You're reabsorbed.
Not the last time I'm going to make you two watch a movie that's going to try and get you to cry.
I'll note down my score for that as well.
I didn't cry, but there were various points where I was like, oh, I was like in a ball of stress. Partly that was because I had to take breaks from it to field calls from my agent about this fucking shit.
Yeah, God,
so I was very much like in the zone with this film. And my last note here says, it's amazing that the lesson we took from the fall of the Berlin Wall and the exposure of the Stasi was that communism is bad and not cops are bad. Because a lot of this shit is like, a lot of this shit still fucking happens. It's the same shit. I mean, like,
it is a tu quoque fallacy, right? But if you'll allow me to be fallacious, we do be doing all this shit also.
Don't write in, I know that was Latin, I do speak Latin.
In like the disclaimer voice, and they were like, very fast, I know it was Latin.
And the thing is that like the GDR has been very successful at sort of posthumously rehabilitating itself.
And great cameras too.
Very much, yeah. No, I mean, I say this as sort of like an accessory to it, right? Like, it is something that like has by reputation become one of the gentler communisms, right? Because they'd only destroy your ability to make art. They wouldn't kill you. They wouldn't even hit you necessarily. And it's a small, weird, beautiful republic that contains such things as Trabants and Goodbye Lenin and Sonnenallee. And it's like, okay, true, it was all of those things, and people do feel nostalgic for it, and it did have universal housing, and it did have free healthcare, and it perversely was better about trans rights than West Germany for a couple of years. But it was also these things too. And I think it's sort of a worthwhile tonic. And I think even if you're sort of like Stasi records agency guys don't like it, I think it has value for that, at least.
Yeah, I was also... I was quite touched by what it has to say about surveillance. And it's a useful reminder, I think, that if you are surveilling someone and if you're watching someone and they can't watch you, you necessarily have more power than them. And therefore that is not an equal society. Like you might say this is about equality, this is about socialism, so everyone being the same, we're just looking out for you. But if you are surveilling somebody, you are in a position of power over that person. And there's just no getting around that. And I think it's a powerful reminder of that, because these sorts of justifications are still being used for police surveillance and heavy-handed policing today, like all the time, like in London. I mean, isn't there a recent case that like the Met have just acknowledged they like violated somebody's human rights, and like they're doing like facial recognition stuff and like stop and search and stuff, and it's always sold as like we're looking out for you and we're protecting people, and it's like you're not though, are you? Because you're actually just the kind of fucking occupying force.
What's really grim is that we don't even have a reason anymore.
Yeah.
Like to do these things, these terrible things, because there are like enemies of socialism, which undoubtedly the GDR had enemies. Like in order to like build communism, in order to like build prosperity and happiness and peace and all this, we like barely even do lip service to any sort of capitalist ideals, whatever those might be. We're just sort of like around, and it's like grim in a different way.
Don't want disruptive protests because they're noisy. Okay, great. Well, I wouldn't want anything to be noisy. I wouldn't want the end of the world to be noisy, would I?
What does this movie say about masculinity?
I don't fucking know. It says a lot about
be a
creating
fucked up little
art.
Dude.
Something I have an immense amount of interest in. As someone who's still trying to figure out what kind of art I can even create.
Well, I mean, you can always use an East German camera.
Well, I'm using a Japanese one at the moment, I'm afraid.
No, because you've betrayed the revolution.
I'm sorry. Sorry, just mate.
I think it has interesting things to say about femininity, actually, especially with regards like Krista's career being more fragile than Dryman's because she is a woman. I thought that was very interesting.
That's right.
Also, these are all like sort of male-dominated environments.
No female Stasi agents. Not that we see.
Which is
that's
a very deliberate choice. Oh yeah, but
it's
DM me.
You see one female Stasi agent, and that's it. And it's the lass who is writing down the transcript of the interview between.
Oh,
But
yeah.
that's literally it, and she doesn't even her face isn't even on screen. It's the back of her head. So not great.
But she's not like an agent the way that
of course
Whistler
not.
is. She's like a stenographer.
Which is so that's the lives of others, a little sort of 3-act morality stage play about East Germany and about surveillance and about parasociality.
Whose turn is it next? Is it my turn?
I honestly have
don't
no
recall.
idea.
Because if it is, then I think I might choose Equilibrium as a companion piece to this.
Ooh, that's a good idea. Yeah, a movie about how going off your meds is actually good for you, and you should do it.
You should take estrogen.
That's right.
Well, I'm looking at the list now.
You pick Jennifer's body.
Oh yeah, good point. That means it's your turn.
Means
Then.
it's my turn. But I gotta be honest with you, I can't think of one, so I'm happy to cede to Equilibrium for now.
You sure?
Yeah, I'm more than happy. Especially if it makes for a good
perfect.
companion piece to this, 100%.
All right. Well, we will return with an next bonus episode.
Because I always respect and listen to women.
And the next mainline episode, which will be the second Man from Uncle
the
movie.
Spy from
Does
My
anyone
Face.
happen to remember?
The Spy
The
with My
Spy
Face.
with my face.
That's
The
right.
Spy with my
The
face.
Spy
Oh
with
my God,
My
brace
Face.
yourselves. Brace yourselves.
fucking
I
love
cannot
the
wait.
series. I'm so excited.
Just wait until we get to the final 60s one that my brother wants
Say
to come
goodbye
on
to
for.
his
Like,
Well,
Fantastic.
guten Abend, liebe listener, and we will see you next time.
we will see you. You won't see us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no,
we will see you.
We can see you. You're looking great, listener, by the way.
Mhm, mhm.
Do.
Fade out. Thank you for listening to yet another episode of Kill James Bond. Next week on the free feed, The Spy with My Face. We're having a lot of fun doing the silly ones. On main, we can get away with doing quite cerebral and thoughtful bonuses. So, considering that it's my pick after the next one, if you have any ideas, please let me know, because I love to listen to the audience on this one. Currently, of course, you don't have to be a subscriber to get the full gamut of content we are creating and producing over winter, owing to how much it sucks to be alive in England right now. It's very expensive and it's not even very good. So at least we can do is give you one podcast a week. But we do still have some patrons now. I'd be remiss to not thank our £15 and above patrons, and those are Christine Fox, Amanda Comet, Fawkes Winchester, Gustavo Lira, Jack Holmes, Paint McCalla, Thomas Oberhardt, Nick Boris, Yarrick, Nate Amori, Harriet de Kock, Corios, the Commissar formerly known as Jen, Library Hitman, Beef Crime, Benno Rice, Jonathan Gerdes, Callan Burney, Max Gamenhart, Jack Drummond, Kit Devine, Kentucky Fried Commie, Jay Martindale, Hell Blood Hands, Lisa Maish, Jonathan Siegel, Tarp O, Big Titty Goth Girl, Mothman, George Rohack, Trip, Harrison Fuller, Charlie Out of the Closet, Alex, a Trans Robot, Zoe Shepherd, Turf Seat Shit and Die Alone, Elizabeth Cox, Danny Potter, The Femboy a Spy. And that's so appropriate, and you couldn't have possibly known how appropriate that is to the episode that we've just recorded. And Finn Ross. Kill James Bond is Alice, Abigail, and Devon. Our producer is the wonderful Nate Bethay. Our podcast art is by Maddie Lipchansky, and our website is by Tom Allen. See ya.